Imagine a kingdom on the edge of greatness, and on the edge of ruin. A land where tribes and warlords fought for scraps, where blood was the language of politics, and betrayal was carved into the throne itself. Out of this chaos rose one man, Æthelstan, the grandson of Alfred the Great. He was the first to forge the patchwork of warring realms into something new, something terrifying to his enemies, the Kingdom of England. But even kings are not spared the shadows of death. In the final days of Æthelstan's life, whispers filled the courts, whispers of curses, of treachery, of God's wrath. The man who built a nation would leave it trembling, his last breath shrouded in fear, suspicion, and mystery. This is not the story of his rise, but of his fall. These are the terrifying final days of Æthelstan, the first king of England. Most will hear this and turn away, just as men of the 10th century turned their eyes from the decay of their king. But you're still here. That makes you different. Prove it. Subscribe now. If not, close your eyes, and join those who chose ignorance as their legacy. As autumn shadows lengthened over England, Æthelstan's kingdom gleamed with success, but beneath the gloss, cracks were growing. Even at the height of his power, the king was beset by threats that would not wait until his old age to strike. He had solidified his reign by 925, accepted in Mercia, then crowned at Kingston upon Thames, slowly binding together the fractious territories of Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, East Anglia. Around 927, Welsh kings and the King of Strathclyde, and even the King of Scotland, met at Penrith and at Emont, swearing fealty to him. Hywel Dda, Constantine II, and others acknowledged Æthelstan as overlord. Victories piled up, the conquest of York, diplomatic marriages, and laws enforced from his courts that stretched from the Scottish marches to the Welsh hills. Yet every victory carried its own poison. For every kingdom submitted, for every treaty made, there were those who festered in resentment. Northumbria, newly won, always glimmered as a land ready to break away. The Vikings, the Scots, and rival nobles watched, waiting. In 934, Æthelstan mounted a bold campaign into Scotland, by both land and sea. Constantine II of Alba, along with subordinate kings, for a time acknowledged Æthelstan's dominance, but this peace was fragile. Old alliances crumbled, tribute and submission felt like chains to the proud rulers to the north. Suspicion brewed, had Æthelstan broken some unspoken promise? Or was the king overreaching? 937 brought the Battle of Brunanburh, a clash that should have secured Æthelstan's legacy. He faced an alliance, Olaf Guthfrithson, King of Dublin, Constantine, King of Scotland, and Owain of Strathclyde. The English won, yes, a resounding victory. But at a cost. The chroniclers say it was immense, lamentable, and horrible, with great slaughter on both sides. After Brunanburh, even though Æthelstan held the throne, the wounds were deep. Northern loyalties slipped. The tribute that once came with obeisance now came with muttered grievances and empty promises. Meanwhile, domestically, the machinery of rule, courts, councils, the Witan, law codes, had never been under greater strain. The expansion of royal authority meant more demands, officers, thanes, bishops, all expecting reward, all expecting justice, all expecting loyalty. And envy was everywhere. Then there were the unknown dangers. Æthelstan, now in his mid-40s, was aging in a time when 45 was no small milestone. But the sources remain frustratingly silent about his health. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle simply says that in the year 939, King Æthelstan died in Gloucester. No cause, no illness recorded. Which only deepens the mystery. Was it disease? A sudden stroke? Poison? The politics of his death, if any, are buried under layers of chronicler silence. What is clear is that the moment he died, all around him the kingdom teetered. York broke away almost immediately, inviting Olaf of Dublin back in. The careful tapestry of peace and control unraveled. Imagine the king in his final days, sleepless nights, courtiers murmuring in halls, letters arriving from dissenters, loyalty bought by oath only, not by love. A man who once commanded fleets and armies now surrounded by the specter of what he could not control. And that's the moment in which we must linger. For in the chaos around him, both his greatness and his weakness are laid bare. In the autumn of 939, the first king of a united England was not the towering figure his enemies had once feared. Æthelstan's body, though barely in his mid-40s, bore the scars of a lifetime of war and the weight of a crown too heavy for any one man. His armies had carried him across mountains, rivers, and battlefields soaked in blood. His victories had reshaped Britain itself. But now, his strength faltered. Those closest to him must have seen it, the tiredness in his eyes, the slowing of his step, the long silences in council where once his voice thundered with command. In the quiet halls of Gloucester, where he kept his final court, whispers grew like weeds, "The king is failing." Some whispered prayers for his health. Others sharpened daggers for the moment his throne stood empty. Imagine being there. The candles burning low, the air heavy with smoke. A once mighty king seated at the high table, his hands trembling as he lifted his cup. Courtiers watched every twitch, every cough, every pause, searching for signs of death before the man had even taken his final breath. Because his end was not only the end of a life, it was the opening of a kingdom's wound. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle offers no detail, only the chilling simplicity of fact. Æthelstan died in Gloucester, on the 27th day of October, 939. No illness is named. No account of final words. Nothing. A silence that screams across 1,000 years. Was it a fever? A wasting disease? A sudden affliction of the heart? Or was it something darker, a cup laced with poison, a plot hatched in the shadows by those who feared his iron grip? We cannot know. And yet, the absence of explanation is more haunting than an answer. And the fear was not only his own. The realm itself seemed to shudder. For Æthelstan was not just a king, he was the glue that held England together. Without him, Mercia might drift back into independence, Northumbria would surely revolt, the Danes would press in from Dublin, and the Scots would reclaim their pride. The crown he had forged from fire and war was a fragile circlet of glass, and all knew it would shatter the moment he was gone. Eyewitnesses did not record his final breath, but they recorded what followed, the unraveling. In York, the Northumbrians wasted no time. Almost immediately, they rejected his successor, Edmund, and threw open their gates to Olaf Guthfrithson, King of Dublin. The unity Æthelstan had fought his entire life to build was breaking apart before his body had even grown cold. His death had not only claimed a king, it had opened the floodgates of chaos. But what of Æthelstan himself, in those last days? Alone in the twilight of Gloucester, knowing the wolves were circling? Did he see the faces of his enemies in every shadow? Did he lie awake at night, wondering if the God he had served so faithfully had abandoned him? His reign had been filled with charters praising the divine hand in his victories, with relics gifted from distant kings, with laws shaped by Christian order. Yet as death drew near, was he comforted, or terrified that his victories would vanish like dust? Picture it, the king on his bed, his breath ragged, his crown heavy but already slipping from his grasp. Around him, bishops murmur prayers, noblemen exchange glances, and somewhere far away, the drums of rebellion already begin to beat. Æthelstan's eyes close, but he knows he must know, that his death will not bring peace. It will bring fire. October, 939. The king is dead. Æthelstan, conqueror of York, master of Mercia, overlord of Britain, lies cold in the earth at Malmesbury Abbey. The candles burn low beside his tomb, monks chant their dirges, and England mourns, or pretends to. But outside those sacred walls, the wolves are already howling. The moment his eyes closed, the unity of England began to unravel like a garment torn apart by greedy hands. The Northumbrians wasted no time. They had never loved the southern king, never embraced his rule with true loyalty. For them, Æthelstan was not a protector, but a foreigner, a southerner imposing law upon their land. Now that he was gone, they turned quickly, throwing open their gates to Olaf Guthfrithson, the Viking king of Dublin. Imagine it, one moment England stood whole, the next, its northern heart was lost. Olaf crossed the sea, banners raised, welcomed not as invader but as savior. Northumbria had slipped through Æthelstan's fingers the moment his hand grew still. In the south, his half-brother Edmund was proclaimed king, a boy of barely 18, untested, unproven. And if Æthelstan's rule had been iron, Edmund's was little more than wax. Nobles who once swore fealty under the weight of Æthelstan's armies now tested their chains. Would this boy-king command their respect? Or would he falter, leaving the realm to crumble into the patchwork of squabbling lords it had been before Æthelstan's rise? Fear spread like a plague. Bishops and abbots, once secure under Æthelstan's protection, prayed desperately for stability. The common folk whispered in taverns and fields, "The king who kept the Danes at bay is gone. The north is lost. Soon the Vikings will come again." And with every rumor, every fearful glance, the strength of England bled away. What did Æthelstan's death truly mean? It meant the dream of unity was fragile as the man himself. It meant that a kingdom forged in war could dissolve in silence. It meant that no matter how powerful a king might be, the grave makes all men equal, and it is the vultures who inherit what is left behind. And yet, his people remembered. Not with comfort, but with fear. The Anglo-Saxon poets, in their grim verses, wrote of Brunanburh, of the field strewn with corpses, of the land stained red by battle. They called it a victory, his victory. But even as they wrote, they must have known that without Æthelstan alive to hold the kingdom together, that victory rang hollow. What use is glory if it dies with the man who won it? At Malmesbury, as the monks laid him to rest, there must have been a terrible silence. The kind that settles not only in the cloisters of an abbey but across an entire land. A silence filled with uncertainty, fear, and the knowledge that the storm had only just begun. The chroniclers tell us that Æthelstan died peacefully, a simple note in the year 939, on the 27th of October, King Æthelstan died in Gloucester, and was buried at Malmesbury. Nothing more. No mention of sickness, no recounting of his final words. Just silence. But history is never silent. Silence itself speaks, and what it hides can be more terrifying than what it reveals. Why was nothing said? Why was the death of the first true king of England recorded with so little reverence? Consider this, Æthelstan's life was extraordinary. He was the grandson of Alfred the Great, the unifier of kingdoms, the victor at Brunanburh, a battle so fierce that poets centuries later still sang of it as the day when England was truly born. And yet, his death was treated almost as an afterthought. Some historians believe this silence is political. For the moment Æthelstan died, the fragile unity of England collapsed. York broke away, the Vikings swept back into power, and the dream of one kingdom seemed to die with him. Chroniclers loyal to the court may have avoided detail not out of ignorance, but out of fear. To speak of weakness was to invite rebellion. Better to say little, to leave his final hours veiled, than to admit that the king's death had unstitched the realm. Others whisper of darker truths. Æthelstan was never universally beloved. His half-brothers, the sons of Edward the Elder's second wife, had resented his rise. The nobles of Northumbria saw him as a foreigner. Even within his court, rivalries festered. Could his death have been helped along? A cup poisoned at a feast? A hand unseen but decisive? We will never know. But what we do know is this: the men who stood to gain from his death gained swiftly. Edmund, his young half-brother, took the crown. Olaf Guthfrithson seized York. And the dream of a united England shattered in a heartbeat. And yet, for all this, Æthelstan's legacy endured. The laws he passed, the charters he wrote, the treaties he forged with kings across Europe, they did not vanish. His memory was not erased. To some, he was the father of England itself. But to others, his reign was a warning, that no matter how strong a king may appear, his death reveals the fragility of everything he built. This is the dark truth of Æthelstan's final days. His greatness was real, but it was mortal. His power immense, but temporary. His victories eternal in song, but fleeting in reality. And in the silence surrounding his death, we glimpse the terror that haunted his court, the knowledge that kings may unite a realm, but death will always divide it again. In the silence after Æthelstan's death, England trembled. The boy King Edmund stepped onto the throne, and the unity forged by his brother's hand began to splinter. Yet for all the chaos that followed, Æthelstan's shadow did not fade. His was a reign that changed the very bones of England. He had been the first to weave the patchwork kingdoms into one cloth, the first to be hailed as King of all Britain. His diplomacy stretched far beyond his island. He married his sisters into the royal houses of Europe, traded relics with emperors, corresponded with kings across Christendom. He was not merely a warrior, he was a statesman, a lawmaker, a visionary. Under his hand, England was more than a land, it became an idea. But greatness comes at a cost. The unity he built was brittle, held together not by tradition or love of crown, but by fear of the man himself. When he was gone, the old fractures reopened. Northumbria slipped away. The Vikings returned. His successors inherited not a fortress, but a battlefield. Yet the echoes of Æthelstan endured. His laws reshaped justice, tightening the bonds between king and people. His court was filled with scholars, poets, and priests who carried forward learning in an age when ignorance was the common rule. And his victory at Brunanburh was sung for centuries as the birth cry of a nation. Still, the shadow of his death cannot be ignored. He proved that kings may unite a realm, but they cannot command the grave. He proved that even the strongest crown rests on fragile soil. And he proved that silence, the silence of chroniclers, of nobles, of history itself, can bury a man more thoroughly than any tomb. Out of his reign came transformation. But it was transformation built on blood, on war, and on fear. Æthelstan's England would endure, yes, but always trembling, always haunted by the knowledge that its first king had died in silence, and that the unity of his realm had died with him. And so we remember him not only as a builder, but as a warning. The first king of England, and the first proof that even kings are mortal. By the time Æthelstan was laid to rest in the quiet stones of Malmesbury Abbey, England was no longer the same. A kingdom had been born, but its birth was violent, fragile, and uncertain. The unity he carved from war dissolved almost as quickly as it had come. His brother Edmund would inherit the crown, but not the strength. His successors would struggle for centuries with the same truth Æthelstan had uncovered, that England was not a gift, but a burden. And yet, his shadow lingered. Chroniclers would look back and call him the first true king of England. Poets would sing of Brunanburh as the moment a nation was forged in blood. But beneath the glory, there is a silence about how he died, about what really happened in those final days at Gloucester. That silence is louder than any hymn. It warns us that history is not only written by victors, but by survivors, and survivors often choose what to forget. The terrifying truth is this. Æthelstan's England did not end with his death. It merely changed its mask. The rivalries, the betrayals, the invasions, they would return again and again, haunting every king who followed. From Edmund to Edgar, from Knut to William the Conqueror, the lesson was always the same: England's crown is heavy, and its unity is always an illusion, waiting to shatter. And so, as we close this hour, remember, the first king of England was not spared the terror of mortality. His final days were clouded in silence, his kingdom trembling at his loss, his legacy caught between glory and ruin. And though he is gone, his story is not. Because the darkness that claimed Æthelstan did not die with him. It lingers in every age, waiting to resurface. The wars, the plagues, the betrayals, the endless struggle for power, England's darkest hours had only just begun. This was the fall of Æthelstan, the first king of England, but it will not be the last time we walk through the shadows of kings. You have walked with me through the silence of a king's death. If you leave now without subscribing, that says something about you, and not in a good way. Don't turn away. Don't bury this history with the silence of the past. Subscribe now, or go to the comments and explain why you would rather join the forgotten.